As so-called Gatesgate started trending on Twitter, former Trump aides and GOP officials started basically dunking on Matt Gaetz in a private group text. And this group text was obtained by Business Insider. And so, of course, we're gonna read you what some of those texts had to say. Now, one former Trump aide who was on the text chain with 18 current and former GOP and White House sources shared this with Business Insider, and here's what they were saying. The former Trump aides aren't necessarily happy to see the 3-term lawmaker in trouble, but they feel a little vindicated, a former White House staffer told Insider. Oh, they feel vindicated, what is that about? Well, for instance, one former White House staffer said this: he's the meanest person in politics. Now, remember, we're not talking about leftists. We're not talking about progressives. We're not even talking about Democrat, like liberal Democrats. We're talking about conservatives, people who worked in the Trump White House, the very same administration that Matt Gaetz could not stop himself from defending. He loved Trump, was certainly a Trump bootlicker and loyalist. But apparently there were people within the White House that were not fans of Matt Gaetz. Republican leadership, one former congressional aide wrote, will likely watch him completely implode in a matter of days without having to do a thing. So I have more to share with you, John, but I wanted to get some of your thoughts first.
Yeah, the prediction that he could implode within a couple of days is an interesting one. I wonder how much we could possibly learn during that time if the investigation is ongoing. Maybe if the investigation has been concluded, then someone from the DOJ might come out and make that clear. Maybe he can do a bunch more media hits that'll make him look really bad. That's certainly possible. In terms of him being the meanest person in politics, as you point out, people who work in the Trump White House said that. They work for Trump, and they think Matt Gaetz is the meanest guy in politics. I don't know. Look, I think that there are a lot of negative qualities that sort of just scream from every word and action that he engages in. Mean isn't the one that I find to be most important or most worrying.
Right.
There's some of the other allegations about him in terms of like why he's in politics, what actually he wants, what he does, his obligation to his constituents to do work. That sort of stuff I feel is more important potentially.
Well, okay, real quick, with the statement coming from that congressional aide about Matt Gaetz imploding, I don't know how true that is, but the way that I read it was, oh, these are people who are looking for Matt Gaetz to implode, right? Sure. And I think that that's fascinating, and I wish we knew why. I wish we knew more details. The accusation of meanness, I agree with you. It's not the worst accusation, especially when you consider the Trump administration. However, I want to know why. I wish we had more context into why it is that they seem to have so much disdain for him. One former Trump White House aide also wrote, "Good riddance." It sounds like he let whatever BS power he thought he had go to his head, and he thought himself above the law.
Yeah, I mean, he's the first politician to do that.
Yeah, I know. Look, there's definitely a lack of self-awareness here, right? Especially when you've worked for the Trump White House. And Trump certainly believed that he was above the law. He was treated as if he was above the law until the very end when, there were some issues with what he was encouraging people to do. There's also some, fraud issues related to his taxes. We'll see if that actually plays out with robust consequences in the end. But yeah, there are plenty of politicians, especially on the right, who seem to think that they're above the law. So there's something else at play, and that's what I'm really curious about.
I would love to know. I really wish that I could sit down very briefly and then never speak to these people again. What their issue with him is. Like he seems, obviously I despise him. Seems awful. He's a total tool. But from their point of view, isn't Matt Gaetz like what this whole thing is about? Like, don't they just want an army of plastic-faced Matt Gaetz that just go on Fox News to own the libs? They don't do anything. They're fine with whatever, proto-authoritarian takes over, doing whatever they want to the government, to our democracy. Like, I really, is the issue just a personal thing? Is it a comment that he made? Do they actually wish that he was doing more work? I would find that to be a positive thing. Yeah, I really wish that I wish there was more substance to the critiques than just, yeah, that guy sucks. I hope he, goes to jail over this.
So let's put out some theories. And my main theory is that despite the fact that it looks as though there's like this united front in pushing the Republican Party toward Trumpism, I think that internally, behind closed doors, the old guard absolutely hates that, right? I think that, these staffers, these former White House aides, these are people who didn't want the Republican Party to pivot over to this pretty disgusting brand of Trumpism. And Matt Gaetz is really a big symbol of that type of culture within the GOP. So I think that they can't publicly say this stuff, right? Because this is what the base is. This is what the base loves, and they can't speak out against it. That's honestly career suicide for them. But I think that internally, the way that they really feel is that this new, I hesitate to say new, but this Trumpish culture that has really overpowered the Republican Party is uncomfortable for them. They don't necessarily agree with it, and it could come with consequences for the GOP eventually. Actually, it did. I mean, with the Republicans no longer in power. So maybe that's what's really fueling it. But there could also be some personal issue as well. Who knows?
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.